Now is our last step on setting up our arm, and that's doing the ikfk switch. We have our hand control already set up. Now we're just going to do the constraint system that is going to switch between that ik and fk. I'm going to hide my controls. I have a little group with all my controls in here. It's going to hide those, but I am going to bring back my control icons for my elbow and my arm so I can see them easily. And what we're going to do here is that I'm going to do a constraint between these two systems. This is the first phase on this. And to do that is I need to bring back all my joints. So I'm going to bring back my binding and my FK so we can still see that they're all there. Actually, now I can move my controls and see them. Hey, look, they're there. See? They're all there. Okay. So how the constraints work is driver and driven. I've been talking about this for a long time now. But what I want to focus on here is that you can have more than one driver on this object. For instance, the driver, I want IK and FK to drive our binding system. And I'm going to do something a little strange. You don't have to do this on yours. I just want to show you how it looks. If I move my IK up here, now I can always get it back to its default position. So it's a clean control. And then I take my arm and I rotate it like, maybe forward and down a little bit like that. Maybe even rotate this one forward. I have pretty much 3 separate joint chains that are manipulated in 3 different areas. If I apply a constraint from my binding to my IK, it'll snap right on top of it. But I can actually make the IK and the FK be drivers and the driven be the FK system. So I'm going to select the root joint for my IK, the root joint for my FK, and then finally, before I want to go back into that, I actually hold down my IK, root joint, and then I hold down command and I select my FK, and then I'm going to select the root joint for my bind. I am not holding down shift when I'm doing this. I'm holding down command. So I will go into my constraint and I'm going to do an orient constraint. Now it's important that this offset's turned off. We want this to snap halfway in between these two systems. So when I hit apply, you see how it moved? That's good. That's what it's supposed to do. Now we only set up one joint, the root. We need to actually set up the second joint in our system too. So I'm just going to expand our hierarchy so we can see the second joint. The order's everything here. I select the IK, the FK, and then the second binding joint. So it was the second binding joint, a second joint for the IK, second joint for the FK, and the second joint for the binding joint, and then I hit apply. If you change the order of this, if you select FK then IK, then when we set up our animation for constraints, it's going to be inverted between the two. Okay, so it is actually now working. You can see how it is blended between our two systems, like that. See? It is working. And at any time, if I need to get these controls back to the original position, I can just zero them out and it will just snap right back to where it's supposed to be. See? So we can leave it back there for now. Okay. So now our constraint is set up. So let's look at our constraints. They're all on the binding joints. So I'm just kind of minimizing my IK and FK joints. And I'll expand over it. Now you can see now we have an orient constraint. And if I expand the second joint, we have a second orient constraint. So if I select on this constraint, you see how we have this weight down here? These two attributes. It says left arm IK01. It says W0, and this one says W1. These are how this actual constraint is influencing it. 1 and 1 means it's halfway in between. They both have full control. So if I wanted the only the IK to control something, I could just zero out the FK. See? Matter of fact, we're going to do that. I'm going to select the second one and zero out the FK on that one too. This is what I was talking about with the order. If you select FK then IK on the second one, these would be inverted and would make this process a lot harder. Okay, so now that we have our system only manipulating IK, as you can see, it is working like that. You could have it right on top of each other. It's just a little easier to see it this way. Okay, so now that we have this set up, we need to actually control between these two. We need to animate. There's no way I want the animator coming in here and animating these. That would be terrible. So that's all we're going to be doing as a keyframe, is that at one state we're going to be at 1 on IK and 0 on FK, and then we're going to invert that. So how do we do that? We're just going to make STKs. So with any attribute selected in the channel box, we click Edit, and we go into Set Driven Key. Okay, and we bring up our set-driven key menu. Okay, so now with this system set up, we need to actually choose a driver and then a driven. It's just like we've been talking about the constraints. Well, our driver is going to be our hand control that has our ikfk attribute. This is going to drive if we're in IK or FK mode. So I say this is a driver. You can even see there's our ikfk. Now I selected that one. Now we need to select our two constraints. Make sure you're selecting the first and second orient constraint on the arm. And then we'll make sure we're on the binding arm too. Okay. So if I select one of these, you'll see we have our weights down here. If I select the second one, we see our weights for the 2. It's a very small change, but you can see the 1 and 2 changing in there. If I select both of them, you see it disappears. We can't set, because they're not exactly the same attribute, we can't set them at the same time. So with the first one selected, the first orient constraint, we select our channels. Now our ikfk attribute is set to 0. So if we select on that control, this is exactly what we want. Everything's in IK. So right at this point, we're ready to keyframe. So we say key, we set key, and then you can see that our constraint has our keyframes on it. Then we can set the second one at the same way. I can select both of them. We can make sure that our ikfk is at 0, and we can make sure that these are actually set properly. And I can say key. So that's the first one. We haven't really done anything because it was already in this state. But what we want to do is go back to the control icon and now set it to 10. Remember when you were setting up your animation and you had to move your time slider first and then pose it? Same thing. This is our new time. So now we're in 10. And I go back to the first binding joint. And instead of being 1 in IK and 0 being in FK, we want to say 0 in IK and 1 in FK. You can see it move in the background. I select my channels that need to be keyframed and I say key. And now I go to the other way. I go to the other constraint. And I say, okay, well, this one's still in IK. Say 0 in IK, and 1 in FK. And I select those two channels for our weights and I say key. It is actually working now. I can make this go away. And if I select my control that has my ikfk switch on it, and I select my attribute and middle mouse drag, you'll see how it goes back and forth between it. Okay, now there are a few issues sometimes when you go to the other arm, on the right side. Sometimes the IKs will actually do this rotation flip coming around. And if that happens, that's just because it's getting confused with what the shortest distance is for the constraint. So to fix that, in your constraints, you see what it says interpret type. You can take this and say it to be shortest, and it will solve that problem. It just knows that it's the shortest direction, not what it thinks it does. You don't have to set this. It very rarely happens on the left arm. It's something that happens more on the right arm, but that's normally what I set on there. And there we go. We can see it actually move back and forth, and that's pretty much our arm system. We have our controls are set up properly. I can go back in. I can say I can be in IK mode and move my arm around like this. Then I can go into FK mode. And then, yep, everything is set up. Now I can select everything and just zero them out. I missed a control. There we go. And then everything is set. And that's our ikfk switch for our left arm.